Let's be extremely clear about what just happened in Georgia, because if you are not furious, you are not paying attention. After years of investigation, after a grand jury indicted Donald Trump and his allies on racketeering charges for trying to overturn the 2020 election, after we heard the audio of him shaking down the Secretary of State to find 11,780 votes, after all of that, the state of Georgia has officially thrown in the towel. The case is dead. It has been dropped. And the reason they are giving us is quite possibly the most insulting, gaslighting piece of legal gymnastics I have ever seen in my life. Make no mistake, this is not an exoneration. This is not a finding of innocence. This is a capitulation. This is the legal system looking at the most powerful man on the planet, looking at the mountain of evidence against him and saying, you know what, this is just too hard. We give up. And while the MAGA ecosystem is currently doing victory laps, screaming about how the witch hunt is over and how this proves the lawfare against Donald Trump was baseless, the reality is actually much darker. The reality is that the strategy of delay, distract, and destroy worked. They didn't win on the facts. They didn't win on the law. They won on the clock. They broke the system until the system simply shrugged and let them walk away. If you are watching this and feeling like you're taking crazy pills, you are not alone. Because what we are witnessing is the official solidification of a two-tiered justice system. There is one system for you and me where if we are caught on tape pressuring an election official to fabricate votes, we go to prison. And there is another system for Donald Trump where he gets to walk back into the White House untouchable, unbothered, and unaccountable. The prosecutor, Peter Skandalakis, who took over this case after the relentless targeted smear campaign against Fani Willis finally succeeded in pushing her aside, filed a motion to dismiss that is breathtaking in its cynicism. He didn't say the evidence wasn't there. He didn't say the crime didn't happen. He effectively said that prosecuting the President of the United States is just too much of a logistical headache. Let that sink in. We are being told to our faces that the pursuit of justice is secondary to the convenience of the court. We are being told that because Donald Trump managed to delay this trial past the 2024 election, he is now rewarded with total immunity from the consequences of his actions in 2020. This is the ultimate failure of the American legal experiment. The message being sent today is loud and clear. If you commit a crime, just make sure you're powerful enough to drag out the proceedings until everyone gets tired and goes home. And honestly, it's pathetic. It is a pathetic abdication of duty. But it's worse than that. It is a dangerous precedent that effectively legalizes election interference as long as you are the president when you do it, or become the president before they can catch you. So let's actually look at this filing. Let's look at the excuses being made, because when you strip away the legalese, what you find is a confession of institutional cowardice. Skandalakis writes, and I quote, "Given the complexity of the legal issues at hand, and even assuming each of these issues were resolved in the state's favor, bringing this case before a jury in 2029, 2030, or even 2031 would be nothing short of a remarkable feat." 2031.
They are projecting that a trial for crimes committed in 2020 couldn't happen until 2031. Why? Because the defendant is the president. Because the Supreme Court has handed him a shield of immunity so broad that it effectively stops any state prosecutor from touching him. Skandalakis is arguing that because the legal battles over immunity and federal supremacy would take years, there is no point in even trying. He calls it illogical to proceed. Illogical? Since when is holding someone accountable for racketeering illogical? He goes further. He argues that special counsel Jack Smith's federal investigation would have been the most appropriate avenue to determine whether these actions were crimes. Stop right there. Do you see what he did? This is a shell game. This is a game of three-card Monty with our democracy. Skandalakis is saying, I shouldn't do this, the feds should do this. But guess what? The feds aren't doing it. Jack Smith also had to wind down his cases because of the Department of Justice's internal policy that a sitting president cannot be prosecuted. So the state prosecutor points to the feds, and the feds point to the policy, and the result is that nobody does anything. It is a perfect circle of impunity. Skandalakis knows Jack Smith's case is dead. He knows the federal avenue is closed, yet he uses it as an excuse to close the state avenue, pretending that there was some other theoretical court where justice could be served. He is washing his hands of the responsibility while knowing full well that he is the last line of defense, and he just stepped aside. This isn't about appropriateness. This is about passing the buck. This is about looking at the wreckage of the 2020 election, the fake electors, the breach of voting systems in Coffee County, the harassment of election workers like Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss, and saying, not my problem.
And let's talk about the complexity argument. He cites constitutional questions and the Supremacy Clause. The Supremacy Clause generally means federal law trumps state law. But the argument here is being twisted to suggest that a president's actions, even when they are clearly criminal acts of election interference, are somehow shielded from state law simply because he holds a federal office. This is a terrifying interpretation. If the Supremacy Clause means a president cannot be prosecuted by a state for trying to rig that state's election, then states have no sovereignty over their own elections. It means the president can treat Georgia or Pennsylvania or Arizona as his personal playground, break their laws, violate their statutes, and then hide behind the federal seal. Skandalakis is effectively conceding that the president is a king. He's conceding that the office of the presidency is a get-out-of-jail-free card for state crimes. And what about the co-defendants? Mark Meadows, Rudy Giuliani, the people who didn't get elected president. Skandalakis dropped the case against them too. Why? Because, he argues, it would be unduly burdensome to try them separately while waiting for Trump. Unduly burdensome. Justice is burdensome. That is the point. It is hard work. It requires time and money and effort. But since when do prosecutors drop charges against alleged racketeers just because the ringleader is hard to schedule? This is unheard of. If you or I were part of a RICO indictment and our boss fled the country or was otherwise unavailable, do you think the DA would say, well, it's too much work to try the rest of you, so you're all free to go? Absolutely not. They would hammer us. They would squeeze us.
But because it's Trump and because it's his inner circle, the rules are different. Skandalakis is saying that because he can't get the big fish right now, he's going to let all the little fish swim away too. Rudy Giuliani, who admitted to lying about election workers, walks. Mark Meadows, who was on that phone call, walks. They are all walking away because the system is terrified of Donald Trump. And we need to talk about how we got here, because this dismissal didn't happen in a vacuum. This is the culmination of a years-long strategy by the Trump legal team and the Republican Party to delay, obstruct, and delegitimize the process. Remember Fani Willis? Remember how the entire conversation shifted from, did Donald Trump try to steal the election, to who is Fani Willis dating? That wasn't an accident. That was a targeted, calculated operation to remove the one prosecutor who was actually moving the ball down the field. They dug into her personal life, they hauled her onto the witness stand, they turned the courtroom into a circus, not because her relationship with Nathan Wade changed the facts of the RICO case, but because they needed to waste time. And it worked. They wasted months, they got the case stalled, they got it punted to the Georgia Court of Appeals, and that delay pushed the trial past the 2024 election. Once Trump won the election, the game was over. They knew it. We knew it. The media played right along, covering the salacious details of the hearing instead of the imminent threat to democracy. They treated it like a soap opera instead of a national security crisis. And now, here we are. Fani Willis was effectively sidelined, and the new guy, Skandalakis, came in to do exactly what the establishment always wanted: make the problem go away.
But the biggest villain in this story isn't Skandalakis. It isn't even Trump, really. Trump is just doing what Trump does, which is destroy everything in his path to save himself. The real villain here is the Supreme Court of the United States. We cannot discuss this dismissal without discussing Trump versus United States. That ruling, handed down by the 6 conservative justices, fundamentally broke our justice system. When they ruled that a president has absolute immunity for core constitutional acts and presumptive immunity for all official acts, they essentially wrote the dismissal order for this Georgia case. Skandalakis cites immunity issues as a major reason for dropping the case. He knows that if he tried to bring this to trial, Trump's team would appeal every single piece of evidence to the Supreme Court, arguing it was an official act. Was calling Brad Raffensperger an official act? Trump would say yes. Was organizing fake electors an official act? Trump would say yes. And with this Supreme Court,
they would agree with him. The Supreme Court created a legal landscape where prosecuting a president is functionally impossible. They designed a maze with no exit. They handed Trump the weapon he needed to kill this case. Skandalakis is just the guy pulling the trigger. But Roberts, Alito, Thomas, Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and Barrett loaded the gun. They knew what they were doing. They delayed their ruling until July 2024 to ensure the trial couldn't happen before the election. Then they issued a ruling so vague and so broad that it would tie up lower courts for decades. They engineered this outcome. They engineered a situation where the voters would go to the polls in November without knowing if their candidate was a convicted felon regarding the election interference. This is a judicial coup. And now we are seeing the downstream effects. The Georgia case falls. The federal cases fall. The New York sentencing is in limbo. The entire accountability mechanism of the United States government has been dismantled, brick by brick, to protect one man. And let's not pretend this is about healing the country. You hear that a lot from these people. We need to move on. This is divisive. Justice is not divisive. Crimes are divisive. Attempting to disenfranchise millions of voters in Georgia is divisive. Lying about dead people voting is divisive. Sending a mob to the Capitol is divisive. Holding people accountable for those actions is not divisive. It is the bare minimum requirement for a functioning society. When Skandalakis says in his filing that millions of citizens continued to make unsubstantiated claims of election fraud and that many individuals continue to believe the 2020 election was stolen, he is acknowledging the damage. He is admitting that the lies worked. But instead of fighting those lies with the truth of a criminal trial, he is surrendering to them. He is saying, well, the country is divided and this case is hard, so let's just drop it. That is cowardice, plain and simple. And look at the reaction from the MAGA base. They are erupting in celebration. They see this as proof that Trump is invincible. And in a way, they are right. The system has proven that he is invincible. He has stress-tested every institution in this country, the press, the DOJ, the courts, the Electoral College, and every single one of them has buckled. They are celebrating because they know what this means. It means the guardrails are gone. It means there is no check on power anymore, which brings us to the pattern. This isn't just about Georgia. This is about a systematic dismantling of the rule of law that has been accelerating for years. We saw it with the Mueller report. 10 counts of obstruction of justice outlined in black and white. What happened? Bill Barr mischaracterized it, said a sitting president can't be indicted, and it went away. We saw it with the first impeachment. Perfect evidence of extortion of a foreign ally. What happened? The Senate acquitted him without calling witnesses. We saw it with the second impeachment, incitement of an insurrection. What happened? The Senate acquitted him again, with Mitch McConnell saying, the courts can handle it. Well, Mitch, the courts just dropped it. Do you see the game? The political branches say leave it to the courts say leave it to the voters are flooded with disinformation and voter suppression, and when the courts finally get a chance, they say it's too close to the election, or it's too complicated, or he has immunity. It is a closed loop of no accountability. Everyone points to someone else, and the result is that the most corrupt actions in American history go unpunished. This establishes a pattern where the president is above the law. We used to say no one is above the law in this country. We learned it in civics class. It was the foundational principle of the republic. That is now a lie. We have to stop saying it. We have to stop pretending it's true. Because if the president can try to steal an election, and the only consequence is that he has to pay some lawyers to delay the trial until he gets reelected, then he is above the law. And frankly, the precedent this sets for the future is the most terrifying part. Phase 3, the stakes. What happens now? What happens when you tell a man like Donald Trump and the people around him that there are no red lines? We are about to enter a second Trump term with the knowledge that the judicial system has preemptively surrendered. He knows now that he can do anything. He can weaponize the DOJ against his enemies. He's already promised to do that. He can pardon the January 6th rioters. He's promised to do that. He can fire the nonpartisan civil servants. And he can do it all with the comfort of knowing that the Supreme Court has his back and the state prosecutors are too scared or too burdened to stop him. But it's not just about Trump. It's about the next guy and the guy after that. We have now established that if you are a president, you can commit crimes to stay in power. If you succeed, you're the president and you can't be prosecuted. If you fail, you just delay until everyone gives up. This is how democracies die. They don't die because of one election. They die because the mechanisms of accountability are dismantled one by one until there is nothing left but raw power. And notice the hypocrisy. The same people cheering this dismissal are the ones who chanted lock her up about Hillary Clinton for mishandling emails. They're the ones investigating Hunter Biden's laptop for the 1,000th time. They love the legal system when they can use it as a cudgel against their opponents. But the moment the legal system turns its gaze toward their leader, suddenly it's lawfare, it's corruption, it's election interference. And the system is so afraid of appearing political that it bends over backwards to accommodate them.
Skandalakis mentions that his family was threatened, and I want to be clear, deeply, truly, that is unacceptable. No public official should be threatened. But we also have to acknowledge that the threats worked. The climate of violence and intimidation that Trump has cultivated, that is part of his legal defense strategy. He attacks judges, he attacks prosecutors, he attacks their families, he puts a target on their backs, and eventually people back down. This dismissal is a victory for intimidation. It is a victory for bullying. It sends a message to every future prosecutor. Do not come for the king, or we will ruin your life, and the courts won't save you. So, where does that leave us? It leaves us in a very dangerous place. It leaves us with the realization that the cavalry is not coming. Robert Mueller didn't save us. Jack Smith didn't save us. Fani Willis didn't save us. The courts have abdicated their role as the guardians of the rule of law. This means the burden falls entirely on us, the people. If the courts won't enforce the Constitution, we have to defend it. If the prosecutors won't hold leaders accountable, we have to organize to ensure that power is checked in other ways. We have to be the memory of this country. We cannot let history be rewritten to say that this case was dropped because it was weak. We have to tell the truth. The truth is that Donald Trump was recorded on audio tape pressuring Brad Raffensperger. The truth is that his team organized fake slates of electors. The truth is that they breached voting machines. The truth is that a grand jury of ordinary citizens saw the evidence and voted to indict. Those are the facts. A prosecutor quitting doesn't change the facts. A Supreme Court ruling doesn't change the facts.
We have to keep those facts alive. We have to be the ones who refuse to be gaslit. Because the moment we agree to move on, the moment we agree to forget what happened in 2020, is the moment we guarantee it will happen again. The MAGA base is erupting because they think they've won the war against reality. They think they've erased the past. But they haven't. This dismissal is a dark day for American justice. It is a stain on the history of Georgia. It is a failure of nerve by Peter Skandalakis. But it is also a clarifying moment. It shows us exactly what we are up against. We are up against a system that is rigged to protect the powerful and punish the weak. And if we want to change that, we can't wait for a prosecutor to do it for us. We can't wait for a judge to do it for us. We have to realize that the institutions we trusted are crumbling, and it is going to be up to this generation of Americans to rebuild them or to watch them turn into tools of authoritarianism. So don't just be angry. Be focused. Understand that today the legal system blinked, and because they blinked, the danger to our democracy has never been higher. I'm Ethan Cole, and that is the reality they don't want you to see.